So I wanted to touch on this. I don't know how many people heard about this, but over the weekend on Saturday, hundreds of teens took to the downtown area of Chicago, vandalizing, breaking people's cars, stopping traffic, causing chaos in the streets, running in and out of traffic, dancing in the streets, standing and jumping on people's cars, trying to jump over the barriers to get into Millennium Stadium, and just causing all out panic and chaos in the downtown streets of Chicago. And then you have so-called community activists speaking out like Bill Morton and Kim Lee, saying that crime needs to be more addressed. The police need more resources to address the crimes, the gangs, and things like that that's going on in Chicago. You even had tourists speaking out saying that they wouldn't come back to Chicago in the summer months. They'll come back in the winter months when there's not so many people out on the streets. And they were scared that this stuff was going down, trying to run and get back to their hotel. And to me, all these so-called activists and things, they only want to speak out always on a surface level, always wanting to address the crimes and the gangs. But that could be addressed and needs to be addressed, but there's something that needs more addressed than that. That creates these elements. You got to address what's creating these elements of the gangs, the crimes, and that's lack of resources and money in these black and urban communities. So you stop trying to address the surface level of the problem and get to the root of the problem. No one wants to address the lack of jobs and resources in the black community. They always want to say it's gangs and it's the parenting, and that too all could be true. But if you want to really address a problem, you got to get to its roots, and then you can affect change. And from what I've seen on the news, all of these so-called community leaders weren't even black, so they have no idea even about the black experience. The so-called leaders were calling for the government to start addressing the crime there in Chicago, but don't just address the crime and put a Band-Aid over the wound, address the whole wound, treat the whole wound. So the crimes and the elements and things like that can stop. You got to address the roots. You can't just address something that you can see on the surface. You got to go deeper than the surface, and not a lot of people is even willing to do that. So they shouldn't even really be speaking on things. They just want to address the crime. And sometimes when police address the crime, they harass and attack innocent people for that matter, labeling everyone in a particular community a criminal. You can't do that. If you really want to address crime and things like that, you got to address the conditions that make it. And the conditions that make crime is resources and having money and opportunities in certain communities. So you got people thriving and doing good in downtown Chicago, but then when you go outside of downtown Chicago to the urban communities, the south side of Chicago, you got people in poverty. Poverty and people doing well, right close hand in hand. And it shouldn't be that way. How do you have people that's thriving and doing so well so close to people in poverty and struggle? And some of it does fall on the parents too. A great deal of it falls on the parents. Lack of fathers, single moms, teenage parents, teenage fathers. And I hate to say that because it's stereotypical stuff that they try to tie to the black community, but a little bit of that has truth in it. But all of it could be directly tied to systemic oppression. When you constantly oppress a person and its community of its resources, what would you expect to get? And if you have young parents and parents in general that don't know no better, how can you expect them to teach the kid any better if they don't know any better? And you do still have good parents, but kids are ultimately going to make the decisions for themselves that they want to make in life. But I'm sick of everyone just addressing surface level things, crimes, single parent households, gangs. Why not address the elements that make those circumstances in the first place? Because when you get to the elements that make them circumstances, you can affect true change. Because you can't address change by just addressing the things that you see. True change lies in the things that you can't see to the naked eye. Because a lot of these communities, black communities in Chicago and even in the U.S. have been systemically oppressed and robbed of its resources and opportunities. So when you take a person's resources and opportunities, what else can you expect but to have madness and mayhem sometimes? Because money is directly tied to crime. If you eliminate the need and address people's need for money and opportunity, you can eliminate the crime, in my opinion. But to me, the government and things don't want to address the crime and get to the root, because the crime is aligning too many people's pockets. And they don't want to stop their money by addressing the crime. So in that matter, they rather keep the crime going and keep their pockets aligned. having crime around is a system in itself. If you take away crime completely, a lot of people will use their jobs. So to a certain degree, the government wants crime. And these cities can't say they don't have resources. They just not putting them in the black community. Because if you go downtown in all of these cities, they have people thriving. And just outside of downtown, it's black poverty in some of these communities. They just put the resources in the aid where they can make the most money from it. Yeah, some of it could do with parenting, or the kids might just be bad kids. They could have had good parents. But when you address the systemic issues that create these things, you get to the root of the problem, you can eliminate most of these things, in my opinion. And it was also almost forgotten, almost left it out. There was a 17-year-old boy shot in the leg and a 16-year-old boy shot in the arm. They didn't speak too much on this, but what I could put together, apparently, when the large crowd of teens went into downtown Chicago, the police may have fired into the crowd, but I can't confirm that because they just briefly touched over it. But you know how these police are. Sometimes they will just fire into a crowd when there may have been other ways that they could have used less aggressive ways to calm that crowd down. But I'm not taking up for the kids neither, because that's out of control and that is chaos. Just hundreds of kids running into a street, breaking up, working decent, hard-working individuals' cars and property. If something does need to be done, but stop trying to address it as just trying to address and get the government to move on crime. Because a lot of time when the government just moves on crime, they address and try to attack and stop and frisk decent, hard-working individuals. When you get to the root cause of crime, then you can affect change on crime. Peace.